All right, chat. We are on chapter 25 of Akutar. Court of Thorns and Roses. You guys want to get updated? ! React in the chat. All the readings go there. All right. Let's see. Let's begin. Sorry, my gum is acting weird. All right. Tomlin was called away to one of the... Oh, shit. Let me put this closer. There we go. Tomlin was called away to one of the boarders' hours after I found that head. Where and why, he wouldn't tell me. But I sensed enough from what he didn't say. The blight was indeed crawling from other courts directly towards us. He stayed the night. The first he'd ever spent away, but sent Lucian to inform me that he was alive. Lucian had emphasized that last word enough that I slept terribly. Oh shit. Yeah, thanks for the sub. Lisoni. Thank you. Appreciate it. Sorry, I'm like tripping on my words. Emphasize that last word that I slept terribly. Even as a small part of me marveled that Tomlin had bothered to let me know about his well-being. I knew I was headed down a path that would likely end in my mortal heart being left in pieces, and yet I couldn't stop myself. I hadn't been able to since the day with the Naga. But seeing that head, the games these courts played, with people's lives as tokens on a board, it was an effort to keep food down whenever I thought about it. Yet, despite the creeping malice, I awoke the next day to the sound of merry fiddling, and when I looked out the window, I found the garden bedecked in ribbons and streamers. On the distant hills, I spied the makings of fires and maypoles being raised. When I asked Alice, whose people I'd learned were called the Yurisk, she simply said Summer Solstice. The main celebration used to be at the summer court, but things are different, so now we have one here too. You're going. Summer? In the weeks that I've been painting and dining with Tomlin and wandering the court lands at his side, summer had come. Did my family still truly believe me to be visiting some long-lost aunt? What were they doing with themselves? If it was the solstice, then there would be a small gathering in the village center. Nothing religious, of course, though the children of the blessed night wander in to try to convert the younger people. Just some shared food, donated ale from the solitary tavern, and maybe some line dances. The only thing to celebrate was a day's break from the long summer days of planting and tilling. From the decorations around the estate, I could tell this would be something far greater, far more spirited. Tomlin remained gone for most of the day. Worry gnawed at me even as I painted a quick, loose rendering of the streamers and ribbons in the garden. Perhaps it was pretty and selfish, given the returning blight, but I also quietly hoped that the solstice didn't require the same rites as Fire Night. I didn't let myself think too much about that. What I would do if Tomlin had a flock of beautiful fairies lining up for him. It wasn't until late afternoon that I heard Tomlin's deep voice and Lucian's braying laugh echo through the halls all the way to the painting room. Relief sent my chest caving in, but as I rushed to find them, Alice yanked me upstairs. She stripped me off my paint-splattered clothes and insisted I change into a flowing cornflower blue chiffon gown. She left my hair unbound, but wove a garland of pink, white, and blue wildflowers around the crown of my head. I might have felt childish with it on, but in the months I'd been there, my sharp bones and skeletal form had filled out a woman's body. I ran my hands over the sweeping, soft curves of my waist and hips. I never thought I would feel anything but muscle and bones. Cauldron boil me, Lucian whispered as I came down the stairs. She looks positively fey. I was too busy looking Tomlin over, scanning for any injury, any sign of blood or mark that that the blight might have left, to thank Lucian for the compliment. But Tomlin was clean, almost glowing, completely unarmed, and smiling at me. Whatever he'd gone to deal with had left him unscathed. You look lovely, Tomlin murmured, and something in his soft tone made me want to purr. I squared my shoulders, disinclined to let me know how much his words or voice or sheer well-being impacted me. Not yet. I'm surprised I'm even allowed to participate tonight. Unfortunately for you, and your neck, Lucian countered. Tonight's just the party. Do you lie awake at night to come up with all of your witty replies for the following day? Lucian winked at me, and Tomlin laughed and offered me his arm. He's right, the High Lord said. I was aware of every inch where we touched, of the hard muscles beneath his green tunic. He led me into the garden, and Lucian followed. Solstice celebrates when the sun outshines the night. As the longest day of the year, it's a time when everyone can take down their hair and simply enjoy being a fairy. Not high fae or fairy, just us and nothing else. So there's singing and dancing and excessive drinking, Lucian chimed in, falling into step beside me. And dallying, he added, with a wicked grin. Indeed, every brush of Tomlin's body against mine made it harder to avoid the urge to lean into him entirely, to smell him and touch him and taste him. Whether he noticed the heat singeing my neck and face or heard my uneven heartbeat, he revealed nothing, holding my arm tighter as we walked out the garden and into the fields beyond. The sun was beginning to find its final descent when we reached the plateau on which the festives were to be held. I tried not to gawk at the fairies gathered, even as I was in turn gawked at them. I'd never seen so many in one place before, at least not without the glamour hiding them from me. Now that my eyes were open to the sight, the exquisite dresses and the little forms that were shaped and colored and built so strangely and differently were a marvel to behold. Yet what little novelty my own presence by the High Lord's side offered soon wore off, helped by a low warning growl from Tomlin that sent the others gathering to mind their own business. Table after table of food had been lined up along the far edge of the plateau, and I lost Tomlin while I waited in line to fill a plate, leaving me to try my best not to look like I was some human plaything of his. Music started near the giant smoking bonfire, fiddles and drums and merry instrument that had me tapping my feet in the grass. Light and joyous and open, the mirthful sister to the bloodthirsty fire knight. Lucian, of course, excelled at disappearing when I needed him, and so I ate my fill of strawberry shortcake, apple tart, blueberry pie, no different from summer treats in the mortal realm. Alone beneath a sycamore covered with silken lanterns and sparkling ribbons, I didn't mind the solitude, not when I was busy contemplating the way the lanterns and ribbons shone. The shadows they cast, perhaps it would be my next painting, or perhaps I would paint the ethereal fairies beginning to dance. Such angles and colors to them. I wondered if any of them had been the subjects of the painters whose work was displayed at the gallery. I moved only to get myself something to drink. The plateau became more crowded as the sun sank towards the horizon. Across the hills, other bonfires and parties began. Their music filtered through the occasional pause in ours. I was pouring myself a goblet of golden sparkling wine when Lucian finally appeared behind me, peering over my shoulders. I wouldn't drink that if I were you. Oh? I said, frowning at the fizzing liquid. Fairy wine at the solstice, Lucian hinted. I said, taking a sniff. It didn't reek of alcohol. In fact, it smelled like summer spent lying in the grass and bathing in cool pools. I never smelled anything so fantastic. I'm serious, Lucian said, as I lifted the glass to my lips, my brows raised. Remember the last time you ignored my warning? He poked me in the neck, and I batted his head away. I also remember you telling me how witch berries were harmless, and the next thing I knew, I was half delirious and falling all over myself. I said, recalling the afternoon from a few weeks ago. I had hallucinated for hours afterwards, and Lucian had laughed himself sick. Enough so that Tomlin had chucked him into the reflection pool. I shook away the thought. Today, just for today, I would indeed let my hair down. Today. Let caution be damned. Forget the blight hovering at the edges of the court, threatening my high lord and his lands. Where was Tomlin, anyway? If there had been some threat, surely Lucian would have known. Surely they would have called off the celebration. Well, I mean, it is time, Lucian said, and I shifted my goblet out of his reach. Tom would gut me if he caught you drinking that. Always looking after your best interests, I said, and pointedly chugged the contents of the glass. It was like a million fireworks exploding inside of me. Filling my veins with starlight, I laughed out loud and Lucian groaned. Human fool, he hissed. But his glamour had been ripped away. His auburn hair burned like hot metal, and his russet eyes smoldering like a bottomless forge. That was what I would capture next. I'm going to paint you, I said and giggled. I actually giggled as the words popped out. Cauldron boil and fry me, he muttered, and I laughed again. Before he could stop me, I downed another glass of fairy wine. It was the most glorious thing I'd ever tasted. It liberated me from bonds I hadn't known existed. The music became a siren song. The melody was my lodestone. And I was powerless against its lure. With each step, I savored the dampness of the grass beneath my bare feet. I didn't remember when I lost my shoes. The sky was an eddy of molten amethyst, sapphire, and ruby, all bleeding into a final pool of onyx. I wanted to swim in it, wanted to bathe in its colors, and feel the stars twinkling between my fingers. I stumbled, blinking, and found myself standing at the edge of the ring of dancing. A cluster of musicians played their fairy instruments, and I swayed on my feet as I watched the fairies dancing, circling the bonfire. Not formal dancing. It was like they were as loose as I was, free. I loved them for it. Damn it, Feyre, Lucian said, gripping my elbow. Do you want me to kill you myself, trying to keep you from impaling your mortal hide on another rock? What? I said, turning to him. The whole world spun with me, delightful and entrancing. Idiot, he said when he looked at my face. Drunken idiot. The tempo increased. I wanted to be in the music, wanted to ride its speed and weave between its notes. I could feel the music around me, like a living, breathing thing of wonder and joy and beauty. Feyre, stop, Lucian said, and grabbed me again. I had been dancing away, and my body was still swaying towards the pull of the sound. You stop being so serious, I said, shaking him off. I wanted to hear the music. I wanted to hear it off of the instruments. Lucian swore as I burst into movement. I skipped between the dancers, twirling my skirt. The seated, masked musicians didn't look up at me as I leaped before them, dancing in place. No chains, no boundaries, just me and the music, dancing and dancing. I wasn't fairy, but I was part of this earth, and the earth was a part of me, and I would be content to dance upon it for the rest of my life. One of the musicians looked up from its fiddling, and I halted. Sweat gleamed on the strong column of his neck as he rested his chin upon the dark wood of the fiddle. He rolled up the sleeves of his shirt, revealing the chords of his music along his forearms. He had once mentioned that he could have liked to be a traveling minstrel, if not a warrior or a high lord. Now, hearing him play, I knew he could have made a fortune from it. I'm sorry, Tom, Lucian panted, appearing from nowhere. I left her alone for a little at one of the food tables, and when I caught up to her, she was drinking the wine, and Tomlin didn't pause in his playing, his golden hair damp with sweat. He looked marvelously handsome. Even though I couldn't see most of his face, he gave me a feral smile as I began to dance in place before him. I'll look after her, Tomlin murmured above the music, and I glowed. My dancing became faster. Go enjoy yourself. Lucian fled. I shouted over the music. I don't need a keeper. I wanted to spin and spin. No, you don't, Tomlin said, never once stumbling over his playing. How his bow did dance upon the strings, his fingers sturdy and strong. No signs of those claws that I'd come to stop fearing. Dance, Feyre, he whispered. So I did. I was loosened, a top whirling around and around, and I didn't know who I danced with or what they looked like. Only thing I had become the music and the fire and the night, and there was nothing that could slow me down. Through it all, Tomlin and his musicians played such joyous music that I didn't think the world could contain it at all. I sashayed over to him, my fairy lord, my protector and warrior, my friends, and danced before him. He grinned at me. I didn't break my dancing as he rose from his seat and knelt before me in the grass, offering up a solo on his fiddle to me. Music just for me, a gift, he played on. His fingers passed and hard upon the strings of the fiddle. My body slithered like a snake. I tipped my head back to the heavens and let Tomlin's music fill all of me. There was a pleasure at my waist, and I was swept away in someone's arms as they whisked me back into the ring of dancing. I laughed so hard I thought I'd combust. When I opened my eyes, I found Tomlin there, spinning me round and round. Everything became a blur of color and sound, and he was the only object in it, tethering me to sanity, to my body, which glowed and burned in every place he touched. I was filled with sunshine. It was like I'd never experienced summer before, like I'd never known who was waiting to emerge from the forest of ice and snow. I didn't want it to end. I never wanted to leave this hilltop. The music came to a close, and gasping for breath, I glanced at the moon. It was near setting. Sweat slid down every part of my body. Tomlin, panting as well, took my hand. Time goes faster when you're drunk on fairy wine. I'm not drunk, I said, snorting. He only chuckled and led me from the dancing. I dug my heels into the ground as we neared the edge of the firelight. They're starting again, I said, pointing to the dancers gathering before the refreshed musicians. He leaned close, his breath caressing the shell of my ear as he whispered, I want to show you something better. I stopped objecting. He led me off the hill, navigating his way by the moonlight. Whatever path he chose, he did so out of consideration for my bare feet, for only soft grass cushioned my steps. Soon, even the music faded, and replaced by the sighting of trees in the night breeze. Here, Tomlin said, pausing at the edge of a vast meadow, his hand lingering on my shoulder as we looked out. Oh, fuck. One sec, sorry. Okay. My back was hurting. Where was I? Here, Tomlin said, pausing at the edge of the meadow. His hand lingered on my shoulder as we looked out. The high grasses moved like water as the last of the moonlight danced upon them. What is it? I breathed. But he put a finger to his lips and beckoned me to look. For a few minutes, there was nothing. Then, from the opposite side of the meadow, dozens of shimmering shapes floated out across the grass. Little more than mirages of moonlight. That was when the singing began. It was a collective voice, but in it existed both male and female, two sides of the same coin, singing to each other in a call and response. I raised a hand to my throat as their music rose and they danced. Ghostly and ethereal, they waltzed across the field, no more than slender slants of moonlight. What are they? Will-o-wisps, spirits of the air and light, he said softly. Come to celebrate the solstice. They're beautiful. His lips grazed my neck as he murmured against my skin. Dance with me, Farah. Really? I turned and found my face mere inches from his. He cracked a lazy smile. Really? As though I were nothing but air myself, he pulled me into a sweeping dance. I barely remembered any of the steps I learned in childhood, but he compensated for it with his feral grace, never faltering, always sensing any stumble before I made it, as we danced across the spirit-riddled field. I was as unburdened as a piece of dandelion fluff, and he was the wind that stirred me about the world. He smiled at me, and I found myself smiling back. I didn't need to pretend. I didn't need to be anything but what I was right then, being twirled about the meadow, the will-o'-the-wisps, dancing around us like dozens of moons. Our dancing slowed, and we stood there, holding each other as we swayed to the songs of the spirits. He rested his chin upon my head and stroked my hair, his fingers grazing the bare skin of my neck. Farah, he whispered onto my head. He made my name sound beautiful. Feyre, he whispered again. Not in question, but simply as if enjoying saying it. As quickly as they'd appeared. Yeah, thanks for the sub. I appreciate it. Holiness, holiness with a tier 1. As quickly as they appeared, the spirits vanished, taking their music with them. I blinked. The stars were fading, and the sky had turned grayish-purple. Tomlin's face was inches from my own. It's almost dawn, I nodded, mesmerizing by the sight of him, the smell and feel of him holding me. I reached up to touch his mask. It was so cold, despite how flushed the skin was just beyond it. My hand shook, and my breathing became shallow as I grazed the skin of his jaw. It was smooth and hot. He wet his lips, his breathing as uneven as my own. His fingers contracted against the plane of my lower back, and I let him tug me closer to him, until our bodies were touching, and the warmth of him seeped into me. I had to tilt my head back to see his face. His mouth was caught somewhere between a smile and a wince. What? I asked, and put a hand on his chest, preparing to shove myself back. But his other hand slipped under my hair, resting at the base of my neck. I'm thinking I might kiss you, he said quietly, intently. Then do it. I blushed at my own boldness, but Tomlin only gave that breathy laugh and leaned in. His lips brushed mine, testing, soft and warm. He pulled back a little. He was still staring at me. And I stared right back as he kissed me again, harder, but nothing like the way he kissed my neck. He withdrew more fully this time and watched me. That's it? I demanded. And he laughed and kissed me fiercely. My hands went around his neck, pulling him closer, crushing myself against him. His hands roved my back, playing in my hair, grasping my waist, as if he couldn't touch enough of me at once. He let out a low groan. Come, he said, kissing my brow. We'll miss it if we don't go now. Better than will-o'-the-wisps? I asked. But he kissed my cheeks, my neck, and finally my lips. I followed him to the trees, through the ever-lighting world. His hand was solid and immovable around mine as we passed through the low-lying mists, and he helped me up a bare hill, slick with dew. We sat down at its crest, and I hid my smile as Tomlin put an arm around my shoulders, tucking me in close. I rested my head against his chest while he toyed with the flowers and the garland. In silence, we stared at over the rolling green expanse. The sky shifted into periwinkle, and the clouds filled with pink light, then like a shimmering disk too rich and clear to be disturbed. The sun slipped over the horizon and lined everything with gold. It was like seeing the world being born, and we were the sole witnesses. Tomlin's arm tightened around me, and he kissed the top of my head. I pulled back, looking at him. The gold in his eyes, bright with the rising sun, flickered. What? My father once told me that I should let my sisters imagine a better life, a better world, and I told them that there was no such thing. I ran my thumb over his mouth, marveling, and shook my head. I never understood, because I couldn't believe that it was even possible. I swallowed, lowering my hands, until now. His throat bobbled. His kiss, that time, was deep and thorough, unhurried and intent. I let the dawn creep inside me, let it grow with each movement of his lips and brush of his tongue against mine. Tears pricked beneath my closed eyes. It was the happiest moment of my life. Chapter 26. One more? More? All right. The next day, Lucian joined us for lunch, which was breakfast for all of us. Ever since I complained about the unnecessary size of the table, we taken to dining at a much reduced version. Lucian kept rubbing at his temples as we ate, unusually silent, and I hid my smile as I asked him, "And where were you last night?" Lucian's metal eye narrowed on me. "I'll have you know that while you two were dancing with the spirits, I was stuck on border patrol." Tomlin gave a pointed cough, and Lucian added, "With some company." He gave me a sly grin. "Rumor has it you two didn't come back until after dawn." I glanced at Tomlin, biting my lip. I practically floated into my bedroom that morning, but Tomlin's gaze now roved my face as if searching for any tinge of regret, of fear. Ridiculous. "You bit my neck on fire night," I said under my breath. "If I can face you after that, a few kisses are nothing." He braced his forearms on the table as he leaned closer to me. "Nothing?" His eyes flicked to my lips. Lucian shifted in his seat, muttering to the cauldron to spare him, but I ignored him. "Nothing," I repeated a bit distantly, watching Tomlin's mouth move, so keenly aware of every movement he made. Resenting the table between us, I could almost feel the warmth of his breath. "Are you sure?" he murmured, intent and hungry enough that I was glad I was sitting. He could have had me right there, on top of the table. I wanted his broad hands running over my bare skin, wanted his teeth scraping against my neck, wanted his mouth all over me. "I'm trying to eat," Lucian said, and I blinked, the air whooshing out of me. "But now that I have your attention, Tomlin," he snapped, though the High Lord was looking at me again, devouring me with his eyes. I could hardly sit still, could hardly stand the clothes scratching my too hot skin. With some effort, Tomlin glanced back at his emissary. Lucian shifted in his seat. Not to be the bearer of truly bad tidings, but my contact at the Winter Court managed to get a letter to me." Lucian took a steadying breath, and I wondered if being emissary also meant being spy master, and wondered why he was bothering to say this in my presence at all. The smile instantly faded from Tomlin's face. "The blight," Lucian said tightly, soft. "It took out 24 of their younglings. 24, all gone," he swallowed. "It just burned through their magic, and then broke apart their minds. No one in the Winter Court could do anything. No one could stop it once it turned its attention toward them. Their grief is unfathomable. My contact says other courts are being hit hard, though the Night Court, of course, manages to remain unscathed. But the blight seems to be sending its wickedness this way, farther south, with every attack. All the warmth, all the sparkling joy drained from me like blood down a drain. The blight can truly kill people?" I managed to say. "Younglings? They killed children, like some sort of darkness and death. And if offspring were as rare as Alice had claimed, the loss of so many would have been devastating that I could imagine." Tomlin's eyes were shadowed, and he slowly shook his head, as if trying to clear the grief and shock of those deaths from him. "The blight is capable of hurting us in ways He shot to his feet so quickly that his chair flipped over. He unsheathed his claws and snarled at the open doorway, canines long and gleaming. The house, usually full of whispering skirts and chatter of servants, had gone silent. Not the pregnant silence of fire night, but rather a trembling quiet that made me want to scramble under the table, or just start running. Lucian swore and drew his sword. "Get Feyre to the window, by the curtains," Tomlin growled to Lucian, but taking his eyes off the doors. Lucian's hand gripped my elbows, dragging me out of the chair. "What?" I started, but Tomlin growled again, the sound echoing through the room. I snatched one of the knives off the table and let Lucian lead me to the window, where he pushed me against the velvet drapes. I wanted to ask why he didn't bother hiding me behind them, but the fox-masked fairy just pressed his back into mine, pinning me between him and the wall. The tang of magic shoved itself up my nostrils. Though his sword was pointed at the floor, Lucian gripped tight on it until his knuckles turned white. Magic, a glamour, to conceal me, to make me a part of Lucian, invisible, hidden by the fairy's magic and scent. I peered over his shoulder at Tomlin, who took a long breath and sheathed his claws and fangs, his baldric of knives appearing from thin air across his chest, but he didn't draw any of the knives as he righted his chair and slouched in it, picking at his nails, as if nothing was happening. But someone was coming, someone awful enough to frighten them, someone who'd want to hurt me if they knew I was here. The hissing voice of the Ator slithered through my memory. There were worse creatures than it, Tomlin had told me. Worse than the Naga and the Suriel and the Bog, too. Footsteps sounded from the hall, even, strolling, casual. Tomlin continued cleaning his nails, and in front of me, Lucian assumed the position of appearing to be looking out the window. The footsteps grew louder, the scuff of boots on the marble tiles, and then he appeared. No mask. He, like the Ator, belonged to someone else. Someone else. And worse, I met him before. He saved me from those 3 fairies on that fire night. Oh, shit. With steps that were too graceful, too feline, he approached the dinner table and stopped a few yards from the High Lord. He was exactly as I remembered him, with his fine, rich clothing clothed in tendrils of night, an ebony tunic, brocaded with gold and silver, dark pants and black boots that went to his knees. I never dared to paint him, and now knew I would never have the nerve to. High Lord, the stranger crooned, inclining his head slightly, not a bow. Tomlin remained seated, with his back to me. I couldn't see his face, but Tomlin's voice was laced with the promise of violence as he said, "What do you want, Rhysand?" Rhysand? How do you say this name? Is it Rhysand? Or is it like Rhysand? Rhysand? Rhysand. Like that? Yeah? Okay. All right. Rhysand smiled, heartbreaking in his beauty, and put a hand on his chest. Rhysand? Come on now, Tomlin. Rhysand. Okay, what kind of voice? I feel like he'd have something like a... Rhysand. Come on now, Tomlin. I don't see you for 49 years, and you start calling me Rhysand. Only my prisoners and my enemies call me that. His grin widened as he finished, and something in his countenance turned feral and deadly, more so than I'd ever seen Tomlin look. Rhysand turned, and I held my breath as he ran an eye over Lucian. A fox mask? Appropriate for you, Lucian. Go to hell, Rhys. Lucian snapped. Go to hell, Rhys. Sorry, I'm trying to give different voices to different characters. Oh, shit. Always a pleasure dealing with the rabble, Rhysand said, and faced Tomlin again. I still didn't breathe. I hope I wasn't interrupting. We were in the middle of lunch, Tomlin said, his voice void of the warmth to which I'd become accustomed. The voice of the High Lord. It turned my insides cold, stimulating. Rhysand purred. What are you doing here, Rhys? Tomlin demanded, still in his seat. I wanted to check up on you. I wanted to see how you were faring, if you got my little present. Your present wasn't unnecessary, but a nice reminder of the fun days, wasn't it? Rhysand clicked his tongue and surveyed the room. Almost half a century holed up in country estate. I don't know how you managed it, but, he said, facing Tomlin again, you're such a stubborn bastard that this must have seemed like a paradise compared to Under the Mountain. I suppose it is. I'm surprised, though. 49 years and no attempt to save yourself or your lands. Even now, the things are getting interesting again. There's nothing to be done, conceded Tomlin, his voice low. Rhysand approached Tomlin, each movement smooth as silk. His voice dropped into a whisper, an erotic caress of sound that brought heat to my cheeks. Rhys approached Tomlin, each movement smooth as silk. His voice dropped into a whisper, an erotic caress of sound that brought heat to my cheeks. What a pity that you must endure the brunt of it, Tomlin, and an even greater pity that you're so resigned to your fate. You might be stubborn, but this is pathetic. How different the High Lord is from the brutal warband leader of centuries ago. Lucian interrupted. What do you know about anything? You are just Amaranthus whore. Amaranthus? Amaranthus whore? Amaranthus? Amaranthus. This is oddly close to Amaranth. Amaranthus whore. Her whore I might be, but not without my reasons. I flinched as his voice wetted itself into an edge. At least I haven't bided my time among the hedges and flowers while the world has gone to hell. Lucian's sword rose slightly. If you think that's all that I've been doing, you'll soon learn otherwise. Lucian. Little Lucian. You certainly gave me something to talk about when you switched to spring. Such a sad thing to see your lovely mother in perpetual mourning over losing you. Lucian pointed his sword at Rhysand. Watch your filthy mouth, Rhysand laughed. A lover's laugh. Laugh and soft and intimate. Is that any way to speak to a high lord of Prythian? My heart stopped dead. That was why those fairies had run off on Fire Night. To cross him would have been suicide, and from the way darkness seemed to ripple from him, from those violet eyes that burned like stars. Come now, Tomlin, Rhysand said. Shouldn't you reprimand your lackey for speaking to me like that? I don't enforce rank in my courts, Tomlin said. Still, Rhysand crossed his arms. But it's so entertaining when they grovel. I suppose your father never bothered to show you. This isn't the night court, Lucian hissed. And you have no power here, so clear out. Amaranth's bed is growing cold. I try not to breathe too loudly, Rhysand. He'd been the one to send that head. As a gift, I flinched. Was the night court where this woman, this Amarantha, was located, too? Rhysand snickered. But then he was upon Lucian, too fast for me to follow with my human eyes. Growling in his face, Lucian pressed me into the wall with his back, hard enough that I stifled a cry as I was squished against the wood. I was slaughtering on the battlefield before you were even born, Rhysand snarled. Then as quickly as he had come, he withdrew, casual and careless. No, I would never dare to point that dark, immortal grace, not into the 100 years. Besides, he said, stuffing his hands into his pockets. Who do you think taught your beloved Tomlin the finer aspects of sword and females? You can't truly believe he learned everything in his father's little war camps. Tomlin rubbed his temples. Save it for another time, Rhys. You'll see me soon enough. Rhysand meandered towards the door. She's already preparing for you, given your current state. I think I can safely report that you've already been broken and will reconsider her offer. Lucian's breath hitched as Rhysand passed the table. The High Lord of the Night Court ran a finger along the back of my chair. A casual gesture. I'm looking forward to seeing your face when you... Rhysand studied the table. Lucian went stick straight, pressing me harder against the wall. The table was still set for 3. My half-eaten plate of food sitting right before him. Where's your guest? Rhysand asked, lifting my goblet and sniffing it before setting it down again. I sent them off when I sensed your arrival, Tomlin lied coolly. Rhysand now faced the High Lord, and his perfect face was void of emotion before his brows rose. A flicker of excitement, perhaps even disbelief, flashed across his features, but he whipped his head to Lucian. Magic seared my nostrils, and I stared at Rhysand in undiluted terror as his face contorted with rage. You dare glamour me, he growled, his violet eyes burning as they bore into my own. Lucian just pressing me harder into the wall. Tomlin's chair groaned as it was shoved back. He rose, claws at the ready, deadlier than any of the knives strapped to him. Rhysand's face became a mask of calm fury as he stared and stared at me. I remember you, he purred. It seems like you ignored my warning to stay out of trouble. He turned to Tomlin. Who, pray tell, is your guest? My betrothed, Lucian answered. Oh, here I was, thinking you still mourned your commoner lover after all these centuries, Rhysand said, stalking towards me. The sunlight didn't gleam on the metallic threads of his tunic. As if balked from the darkness pulsing from him, Lucian spat on Rhysand's feet and shoved his sword between us. Rhysand's venom-coated smile grew. You draw blood from me, Lucian, and you'll learn how quickly Amaranth's whore can make the entire Autumn Court bleed, especially its darling lady. The color leached from Lucian's face, and he held his ground. It was Tomlin who answered. Put your sword down, Lucian. Rhysand ran an eye over to me. I knew you liked to stoop low with your lovers, Lucian, but I never thought you'd actually dabble with mortal trash. My face burned. Lucian was trembling, with rage or fear or sorrow, I couldn't tell. Sorry, I'm like losing my voice. The lady of the Autumn Court will be grieved indeed when he hears of her youngest son. If I were you, I'd keep your new pet well away from your father. Leave, Rhys, Tomlin commanded, standing a few feet behind the High Lord of the Night Court. And yet he didn't make a move to attack, despite the claws, despite Rhysand still approaching me. Perhaps a battle between two High Lords could tear this manor to its foundations and leave only dust in its wake, or perhaps it's Rhysand who was indeed this woman's lover. The retaliation from hurting him would be too great, especially with the added burden of facing the blight. Rhysand brushed Lucian aside as if it were a curtain. There was nothing between us now, and the air was sharp and cold, but Tomlin remained where he was, and Lucian didn't so much as blink, and Rhysand, with horrific gentleness, pried the knife from my hands and sent it scattering across the room. That won't do you any good. Anyway, Rhysand said to me, if you were wise, you would be screaming and running from this place, from these people. It's a wonder you're still here, actually. My confusion must have been written across my face, for Rhysand laughed loudly. Oh, she doesn't know, does she? I trembled, unable to find words of courage. You have seconds, Rhys, Tomlin warned. Seconds to get out. If I were you, I wouldn't speak to me like that. Against my volition, my body straightened, every muscle gone taut, my bones straightening, magic, but deeper than that, power that seized everything inside me and took control. Even my blood flowed where he willed it. I couldn't move, and an invisible talon-tipped hand scraped against my mind, and I knew one push, one swipe of those metal claws, and who I was would cease to exist. Let her go, Tomlin said, bristling, but didn't advance forward. A kind of panic had entered his eyes, and he glanced from me to Rhysand. Enough. I'd forgotten that human minds are as easy to shatter as eggshells, Rhysand said, and ran a finger across the base of my throat. I shuddered, my eyes burning. Look at how delightful she is. Look how she's trying not to cry out in terror. It'd be quick, I promise. Had I retained any semblance of control over my body, I might have vomited. She has the most delicious thoughts about you, Tomlin, he said. She's wondered about the feeling of your fingers on her thighs, between them too. He chuckled. Even as he said my most private thoughts, even as I burned with outrage and shame, I trembled at the grip still on my mind. Rhysand turned on the High Lord. I'm curious. I'm curious. Why did she wonder if it would feel good to have you bite her breast the way you bit her neck? Let her go. Tomlin's face was twisted with such feral rage that it struck a different, deeper chord of terror in me. If it's any consolation, Rhysand confided to him, she would have been the one for you, and you might have gotten away with it. A bit late, though. She's more stubborn than you are. Those invisible claws lazily caressed my mind, then vanished. I sank to the floor, curling over my knees as I reeled in everything that I was, as I tried to keep me from sobbing, from screaming, from emptying my stomach onto the floor. Amarantha will enjoy breaking her, Rhysand observed to Tomlin. almost as much as she'll enjoy watching you as she shatters her bit by bit. Tomlin was frozen, his arms, his claws, hanging limply at his side. I'd never seen him look like that. Please, was all that Tomlin said. Please what? Tomlin said, gently, coaxingly, like a lover. Don't tell Amarantha about her, Tomlin said, his voice strained. And why not? As her whore, he said with a glance tossed in Lucian's direction. I should tell her everything. Please, Tomlin managed, as if it were difficult to breathe. Rhysand pointed at the ground and his smile became vicious. Beg, and I'll consider not telling Amarantha. Tomlin dropped to his knees and bowed his head lower. Tomlin pressed his forehead to the ground, his hand sliding along the floor towards Rhysand's boots. I could have wept with rage at the sight of Tomlin being forced to bow to someone, at the sight of my High Lord being put so low. Rhysand pointed at Lucian. You too, foxy boy. Lucian's face was dark, but he lowered himself to his knees, then he touched his head to the ground. I wished for the knife Rhysand had chucked away, for anything which was to kill him. I stopped shaking long enough to hear Rhysand speak again. Are you doing this for your sake, or for hers? He pondered, then shrugged, as if it weren't forcing a High Lord to pretend to gravel. You're far too desperate, Tomlin. It's off-putting. Becoming High Lord made you so boring. Are you going to tell Amarantha? Tomlin said, keeping his face on the floor. Rhysand smirked. Perhaps I'll tell her, perhaps I won't. In a flash of motion too fast for me to detect, Tomlin was on his feet, fangs dangerously close to Rhysand's face. None of that, Rhysand said, clicking his tongue and slightly shoving Tomlin away with a single hand. Not with a lady present. His eyes shifted to my face. What's your name, love? Giving him my name and my family name would lead only to more pain and suffering. He might very well find my family and drag them into Prythian to torment, just to amuse himself. But he could steal my name from my mind if I hesitated for too long. Keeping my mind blank and calm, I blurted the first name that came to mind, a village friend of my sister's whom I'd never spoken to and whose face I couldn't recall. Claire Bedor. My voice was nothing more than a gasp. Rhysand turned back to Tomlin, unfazed by the High Lord's proximity. Well, this was entertaining. The most fun I've had in ages, actually. I'm looking forward to seeing you three under the mountain. I'll give Amarantha your regards. Then Rhysand vanishing into nothing, as if he stepped through a rip in the world, leaving us alone in horrible, trembling silence. All right, chapter 27. Okay. All right, so we found out who Rhysand is. Rhysand, huh? Jollz, it gets better. One more. Chapter tomorrow. No. 27 tomorrow. 27 tomorrow. I don't like Rhysand because he seems kind of menacing at the moment, but I like his tone, if that makes sense. It's bedtime. Jollz, do you give Rhysand energy? I just like his tone as well.